Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 416 and 417. Saving Ace, The Next Stop, The Great Prison, and Love is a Hurricane, Love, Love, Hancock. In these episodes, Hancock has fallen in love with Luffy, and I just do not know what to make of this. I don't know what to think of this at all. It's so perfect. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you so much to Gabriela for commissioning this episode. I'm not sure who's here in the chat. I haven't seen anybody yet, so I may be alone. But I hope that you guys have been enjoying the coverage of this weird arc. It's like part of the archipelago arc, but it feels very distinctly separate to me, you know, and maybe eventually things will tie together and it'll seem like it's part of the same one. But as of right now, I'm definitely thinking of this as like the Lady Island arc. And what we're having happen here is truly unexpected. And that's something that I'm just always here for. Like, even if it's sort of goofy, if you go left when I think you're going to go right, I'm always going to at least want to know more, you know? And that's like half the battle, is keeping people interested. So, episode 215? I just said, and now I've lost track. But it's 215. It's 416. Could I have been more off? So, we start this one with this sort of weird vibe coming off of Hancock. And I was really not sure what to think of how she was behaving. You know, there's like a moment where everything seems normal, and she's telling Luffy like she'll be happy to help him and he says, "You're really going to give me a lift?" And she says, "We aren't enemies anymore, and I wouldn't lie. I'd be happy to help." And I'm thinking this is just because of the favor that he has done her and the just overall upstanding citizen energy that he's giving off. She says, "We'll set sail. The Kuja pirates will get you safely to the Sabaody archipelago." And both her sisters are like, "Wait, the Kuja pirates we're using our ship?" And they seem pretty startled, and I really wondered what they thought was going to happen, like how many ships they have, or were they going to like build him something small just for him? Obviously, this is being given sort of the royal treatment, and they just did not think that he warranted this kind of like VIP experience. So she's telling him, like, rest up, we leave first thing tomorrow morning. And he says, "I'll be out of here tomorrow morning, don't worry." And she has a really odd reaction. And she's looking over her shoulder and kind of like doing those furrowed eyebrows in this way that I was like, what exactly is happening? I thought, and I think this is like a purposeful misdirection, that she was pretending to do him this favor, but was planning to double cross him. And I was a little disappointed when I started to think that, because I was really enjoying her coming over and seeing him as a good person, and just sort of like the change in her demeanor, and I wanted more of that. So I thought maybe that was all an act, because we've seen her put on acts before, and maybe that was like a warning for us as viewers that there's going to be a point where even you are fooled. So I thought maybe when she gets this sort of like shady expression on her face, that this was an indicator of her real feelings being not as positive, and Luffy is walking into a trap, which is what makes the next scene like a lot more interesting to watch, because there's a sense as a viewer that all is not well and things could go left at any moment. So she tells her sisters to make sure that Luffy is welcome at the banquet tonight. And her sisters are really, really shocked by this as well. Both of them, apparently there's like never been a man invited before, so it's just not something that they do. And of course Luffy's so thrilled because he's starving. And all he has wanted this whole time is to be fed. Like, really, that's his priority at all times. But because of the way the sisters react, again, I'm like, is this what it looks like? Or is there something else happening here? So it's the celebration of the Kujapira's safe return. And also remember that they were able to like steal a bunch of stuff from the fucking Navy. So they're celebrating that as well. And he's really excited. He asks her if she's going to come. And she says, no, I'm feeling a bit tired this evening. I think I'll just go to bed. Again, it's raising all sorts of alarms. Why don't you want to be there? It's feeling like the Red Wedding. Like, what are you planning? Why is this like... Why is the energy so strange, you know? And it seems like her sisters and Granny, what is her great name? Granny Nyon? She is really almost like, is something up? Because the whole attitude of the Snake Princess feels so off to her. There's a line here. And it's too bad there's nobody in the chat, because I don't know, maybe somebody can enlighten me here. But Luffy says, I can't hardly believe it. There's a long pause. Granny's cheeks grow pink. And she looks down and says, you mean can hardly believe it. And why is she embarrassed? Why are her cheeks pink? What is that moment? I feel like that was something that didn't translate very well. That there's like, you know, other significance to it, but it just, for whatever reason, didn't cross over with the dub very well. And we see Hancock's face, and here she gets like very teary-eyed. And Granny is saying, I'm surprised the Snake Princess has put so much trust in him, and so quickly too. All of this is really fueling this idea that she is setting him up. And the fact that she's teary-eyed, I almost thought she's setting him up and regrets it already. Like, she feels like this is a necessity and that they need to do away with him for some reason, but doesn't really want to and feels guilty about it. And so she's doing it against her better judgment, but feels like she has no choice. That's like the way I was interpreting how she's acting right now. So we then go to the actual banquet, and there's a very strained energy in this room. Part of that is due to the fact that Luffy is an absolute maniac who never stops eating for a moment, and all of the women around him are just sort of blown away at how much he's eating, how uncomfortable this is. They've never had a man at the banquet before, and so none of them seem to know how to act or whether they should talk to him. He's using his stretching ability to like steal everybody else's food. And we have the three women whose lives he saved, and they're sort of putting their heads together like, look, I know he saved us and everything, but like, he's really kind of tacky, isn't he? Like, this is all extremely crass. So then we get this moment where two of the women are leaning towards each other, talking about how weird men's bodies are. Did you see that he could stretch? And they start asking, do you think that he'd mind if I pulled on his face a bit? And this becomes a whole thing. As they turn to ask him, the woman who's got like the long black hair, I can't remember her name, but she's like, you guys shouldn't be talking to him at all. Like, this is completely unacceptable. To which the girls are like, he's at our banquet, so obviously this is not the situation we are usually having. And this leads to all of the women sitting and kind of theorizing what it might be that the Snake Princess was thinking by sending him here. And that perhaps she didn't actually forgive him. Perhaps she's not doing him a favor. Maybe she is getting him like so full and tired from eating that he lets his guard down so that we can attack him. And I love that the redheaded one that has the really weird laugh, she says, that's assuming a lot, but it sounds fun. And I don't know why, but I really appreciated the fact that even in the text, the actual dialogue, a character is like, we're really just making this up, but okay, sure. So they all straighten up and sort of turn to look at Luffy. And there's a real sense of like, all right, it's about to go down. And they're drawing weapons and they're preparing to come at him. And there's a pause and Luffy says, you all are really pissing me off. And he's looking around with this like expression. Of course, he's spherical at this point because of how much he's been eating. But he grabs a couple of ladles and like a pan and he says, I've had enough of this. And they all, of course, think this is him preparing to fight them off, that he spotted they were coming at him and that they were going to, he's now going to defend himself. And I love that one of them says like, we should have expected this behavior from a man. And I'm like, you guys were just planning to knife him in the back at dinner. Like, what do you mean? And they are coming at him when he finally yells, why aren't any of you singing? And they were building up such momentum as they were attacking him that they have to like skid to a halt and they just fall on the floor in front of him. And he says, you guys are not doing this right. This isn't how you celebrate. And he just begins to bang a ladle on a pot and sing Binks's Brew. It's really funny because, like, first of all, there's no tune, really. Like, he's not, because of the way that he's just hammering on this pan, there's not, it's even hard to hear how the tune goes with his voice. And then at one point he's just done one verse and then he yells everybody, and I'm like, I don't know that they know this song, buddy. Like, they've never seen a man before. I'm pretty confident in saying that the songs, they probably don't know. But despite that they don't know the songs, everybody seems a little bit charmed by his behavior. If not like actively getting into the party spirit, they're at least laughing at him, which is sort of making the energy of the room warm toward him. And it's a lot less tense all of a sudden. Thank God. So everybody begins to laugh. We cut to Luffy sticking chopsticks up his nose as he does, and all of the women like figuring out how to do it as well, and he's just so excited as they begin to like dance on top of the tables with these chopsticks in their nose. Oh my god, you guys, it's so dumb, I swear. And the woman with the long black hair is just like, this is really awful, you guys, there's no class happening here, what are you doing? Eventually Luffy has painted a face on his belly and is sort of making it talk like it's a giant puppet or something. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but have we ever seen him do this before? I feel like this is a brand new thing. He calls it gum gum belly talk. And he blows his like cheeks up at one point and is yanking on them, just really putting on a show using his stretching ability. And then we go back to eating, and they are all a lot more forgiving of how gluttonous he is now that he's been like entertaining them for so long. So yeah, they're giving him all this extra food, but they're also beginning to crowd around him because they want to feel the stretchiness of his body. And so he's trying to eat, but they're yanking on his cheeks and on his ears and on like the back of his neck. And he's like, guys, you gotta stop. I can't eat with all of you doing that. And I really think that's the only problem here. It's not that they're invading his personal space. It's not that they're pulling on his skin. The only thing that bothers him is that doing this makes it hard for him to eat. That's all it is. And the woman who's been sort of documenting things, she's got a very smooth bob with like two barrettes. And she's the one pulling out her notebook all the time. She says, there's a lot of people who want to touch you just once. Look. And she points to this long line that has formed. And she holds up a sign that says 20 goal per touch. And I'm not sure if that's what it says, like the little translation at the bottom. And just like a side note, Hulu doesn't do the translations. It's only Funimation that translates the written characters on the screen so that I can tell what they say. And that's a separate type of subtitle than the dialogue subtitles. So it's really hard to see, and the dialogue is laid over it right here. And I can't tell. It says GOL per berry. I'm not sure if that's like just a sort of weird translation thing and that what it means is still berry, or if they have a different currency on this island and it's, just something totally different that we haven't seen before. But I love that Luffy gets mad that she's just decided to make money out of this behind his back. So he starts to get chased around as all of these women are trying to like touch him, and they all have heart eyes. And I just really want to acknowledge how well done this is, because what we have here, and Luffy even acknowledges this later when he's talking about his own crew. What we have here is a dude on an island full of ladies all wanting to grope and touch him. It could be any man's dream. I say any man who's attracted to women's dream. And Luffy, it's just wasted on him. He just doesn't have any horniness in him. It doesn't seem at all. So that's not to say that this is actually sexual, but it could very easily, if he were a much creepier dude, be turned sexual with very little effort. Very little effort. And the women would probably not really know that's what he was even doing, because they're not familiar with men's bodies. So if you were a creepster and all these women were like, oh, I just want to touch you and see, just drop trow and be like, go ahead, babe, touch all you want. And that's a fucking done deal. And because Luffy is just so not interested, it turns into a pain in the ass. They're interrupting his eating. And that's the only problem. If it weren't for the fact that he was in the middle of a banquet, he'd probably be fine with it and just be like, yeah, go ahead, girls, touch all you want, knock yourselves out, And they eventually drive him out of the building. He goes through a wall and they're chasing him down. And I just kept thinking about how if at a later point he is with his crew again and he tells them he was on an island of only women who all wanted to touch him, I feel like there's going to be some folks who really are, they're going to be very bitter and jealous. That's all I'm saying. And he just hides off to the side and says, what the hell is the matter with him? But Margaret, she says this was all the food I could get. And she brings him a like haunch of meat, you know, one of those like round meat balls that's got the bone sticking out of it. That's the size of the two of them put together. And yet, I guess it's that he didn't get to finish eating it, but later on he's complaining that he didn't have enough to eat. And I was just like, I really still don't feel like I have a good understanding of how much Luffy has to consume to stay healthy, you know? So anyway, Margaret is just trying to help him out here because he did her a good turn and she could see that he was being fucking swarmed. And so she gets him out and she calls him her hero. And then we go to Hancock, who is standing on the balcony looking down at her kingdom, and she's got such a sad expression. And her sisters are looking at her saying, she said she was too tired for the banquet, but she's not going to bed. She's not eating. What's going on with her? And she's holding a glass. I think it's just water. And she whispers tomorrow morning. And there's like a drop that falls into the glass because she has started crying. And it's like, it almost seems like she's never cried before. And I don't think that's at all true based on, you know, what we found out about her past. I could easily have believed it if they said she'd never cried before hearing about all of that. But now I'm just like, yeah, no, she's just a person who's gone through some shit. She drops the glass and she collapses on the ground and is like very red in the face and sweating and breathing hard. And I really have to give the voice actress a lot of props on this because she really makes Hancock sound like she's struggling to speak whenever she's got dialogue. So then we have one of the like messengers from the palace, oh my God, I keep forgetting Luffy and that giant fucking haunch of meat. But he is sitting down with Granny Nyon. Oh no, it's not a messenger. That's Margaret. She looked different with her snake around her waist like that. But he comes and sits down with Granny Nyon and she begins to share some of the info she's getting from the newspaper with him. And takes it for granted that he knows already that the Snake Princess is one of the 7 warlords. And like he stops and he's like, wait, who is? And when she explains it to him, he just completely loses it. And is like, are you serious? Wait, so she's extremely strong? And Granny Nyon is like, I can't believe you're a pirate and you don't know who all the warlords are. And I kind of love the fact that Luffy even goes, yeah, you'd really think I would know, wouldn't you? That almost felt like Oda going, I know, guys, he should know. But, you know, for the sake of things, he can't. So just forgive me. And Granny says, don't you ever read the newspaper? And he says, I sure don't. But wow. And she explains, like, she's also the captain of the Kuja pirates, and she got made a warlord about 11 years ago, but the world government put a bounty of 80 million berries on her head after just one expedition. And she says that they were notorious before she became captain, but once she, you know, began to make trouble, it was brought to an entirely different level. He asks specifically what she did, but Granny does not tell him. And only says her title is about to be revoked. And then we get the news that he is actually really relevant to Luffy. First, that the warlords are teaming up with the Marines and that they're going to have a war with Whitebeard, which obviously Granny Nyon is like, this is such old news. I can't believe how shocked you are by this. And he's trying to do, oh, this is too much for me to take in all at once. Just give me a second. And she continues and she's like, you really don't know jack shit, do you? There's a whole other thing going on as well, because like granted, this is conjecture, but most of us can see what the fuck is like happening here. And Captain Whitebeard, it's like he has such a reputation that he would not let his people get hurt, but even so, it feels like they're laying out a trap, and they have announced the public execution of Portgas the Ace. And of course, that's the moment where Luffy just stops dead and is like, wait, what? And this was something that I really got a little bit confused by, because, you know, it was only a little while back that he got some news, and I can't remember if it was through the Vivre card or if there was something else that he overheard, maybe from his grandfather or something. But Luffy was like made aware that shit wasn't going great for Portgas not that long ago, and he just threw his hands up and was like, Ace can take care of himself. I don't think he'd like it if I interfered. And I don't know if it's simply that the danger was not well defined, and he thought it was just some sort of like, for lack of a better way of saying it, that it was just routine danger, you know, the kind of danger you are always in as a pirate. And now hearing the specifics of it and how on the edge of death he really is makes it completely like, you know, that's a horse of a different color. But it was a little bit surprising to me how much his attitude changed here and how seriously he was taking the threat all of a sudden, when I've like remembered so clearly how surprised I was by the fact that he sort of hand waved his brother being in enough danger that he had heard about it, you know, by whatever means he had. And like I said, maybe it's just the specificity of the execution lined up, but I just found myself kind of going, I don't know, man. I understand that it might seem like it's different, but you trusted him to get out of whatever like situation he was in before. And I don't know why you were so willing to let him handle it, and now you suddenly think that he can't. I don't know if it's simply him being like outmatched as a, you know, a simple practical consideration, but all that, you know, all that said, he has to explain to them who Ace is, that he's his brother, and is just like, well, now I've got to fucking do something. And when he tells Granny, she gets this expression on her face and is just like, oh my God, I had no idea. To which Luffy is like, yeah, I didn't either. He can still escape, right? I'd say his best chance would be if Whitebeard takes the bait and wins. And he says, does it say where they're going to execute him? In the town square of Marineford, where Navy headquarters is located. It says the execution will take place in 1 week, 6 days from today. And when he asks about how long it would take to get back to Sabaody, she says at top speed it would take at least a week. If we were able to get like one of the marine ships, you might be able to do it in a few days. And he is really startled that the Marines have ships that are so much faster. It turns out that they have access to currents that others aren't allowed to take. And when she says they're allowed to use these currents, the image that's on the screen when she says it is a whirlpool. And I just kept kind of like, does she mean that their ships get sucked down into the whirlpool and then wind up somewhere else? Like, is that why we're seeing this? Or is it just meant to be sort of symbolism? Currents, whirlpools, you know, they're formed by currents. Like, is that all it is? I couldn't tell. And she does say, like, they're from Ennis Lobby to impel down to Navy headquarters and back. And Ennis Lobby had that whirlpool. I keep wanting to say whirlpool. So that was part of what made me wonder. Oh my God, you guys, I'm so sorry. She literally says right here, think of it as a giant whirlpool that connects the 3 facilities. Oh my God, I don't know how I missed that. I swear to God, I watched this and I wasn't even like playing Candy Crush while I watched it. I fully watched it, but so sorry. But yeah, she explains how the currents are changing and the ships are, brought in. So, okay. I was like, I don't know how I missed this explanation, but I remember the beginning part. She says most pirate ships would rather skip the current altogether, but it's very convenient for the Navy. So Luffy is like, well, shit, what should I do? And this is when he takes his hat off and he pulls the Vivre card down. And it's on fire. It's on fire, like, not with flames, but it's like smoldering the way that happens when you light paper on fire and it starts to go out. It kind of looks like that. And maybe that's what it was that got Luffy's attention before, when he decided not to like take any action to help his brother. But in any case, Granny recognizes what a Vivre card is right away. Like when she sees it, she's like, oh my God, that's your brother's, isn't it? She says they're also known as the paper of life. And they give you a hint about the person's state of health as well as their direction. Luffy says, back when he gave it to me, it was 10 times bigger. And then he says, looks like Ace has been busy on his own adventure, which is that's one way to put it. It felt so mild. This shit is on fire, my dude, and almost gone. And you're just like, well, guess he's really been on an event. I'm like, he's wasting away in a fucking dungeon somewhere. I don't know. It just feels like Luffy keeps trying to minimize shit with Ace, even as he's like growing agitated about it and deciding to do something, So anyway, yeah, he says Ace wouldn't be happy about his little brother saving him, but that's still better than him dying. And just says, I've got to try. To which, of course, Granny is like, you have absolutely no shot, right? Like, that's not happening. You can't win. And he says, I'm going to need to take a little side trip. Sorry, everyone. Which I was startled by, because what that sounds like he's saying is, I was going to go find my shipmates, my crewmates, but now that I have to like save my brother, I can't go search for them yet. But I was sort of like, you need them to complete this mission. So I assumed he was going to try and find them first. And I guess the only thing that I can think, because he will need them, like, let's be real here, there's no way he's doing this without his crew. So there's a few ways that this can work. He either accidentally like finds them on his way back and is able to collect them on his way, or each of them makes their own way back to Sabaody somehow, or they hear about the execution, and because they aren't sure where everyone else is, but they know that's Luffy's brother, they all decide to head in that direction independently because they realize more than likely they will find Luffy there. There's like a lot of ways that this could wind up, but yeah, I was genuinely a little startled when I realized that Luffy isn't saying, I need to make a side trip before I go see my brother to pick up my friends. It was, I need to make a side trip to save my brother before I go like try and find my friends. And like, he doesn't actually know where anybody is. So I'm not mad at him for this. I just could not help but laugh at like, sir, you really have been outmatched in the last couple of fights, and you think that you're going to be able to wander up there and just handle this by yourself. But the thing is with Luffy is that even if he doesn't think he can win, he feels like he's got no choice, that if he doesn't at least try. I think the way that he phrases it is, I couldn't live with myself, which, that's honestly a pretty good measure of like what action to take at a given time when things are on the line is like, what if I, woke up from a year from now and think back to this moment, what am I going to wish I had done? And oftentimes that can clarify things quite a bit. If you feel like you don't really know, like mentally putting some distance between your decision and your current situation can crystallize everything and make it really obvious. So I sort of liked that moment for him. But yeah, so he's like really panicking here and just puts his foot down and is like, I don't care. I am going to have to figure something out. Even if I die, I've got to try. I appreciated this because I really was a little bummed out last time at how he was willing to let his brother swing in the breeze, it felt like, So I was relieved to see that he was about to go into this. I don't want Luffy to just let his brother figure it out, So this is when Granny explains to him that once he gets because he's going to be transported, and once he gets transported to Marineford, she says everybody is going to be keeping a close eye on the situation. There's going to be warlords, there's going to be admirals, it's going to be a whole thing. And keep in mind, because your brother is the most important prisoner in the Navy's custody, the prison will be carefully guarded, and it has quite the fearsome reputation if you haven't heard. It may prove impossible to enter no matter what. And Luffy just says, I'll worry about that when I get there, which is fair. Like, yeah, it's talking about what you may find when you get there. We don't have time for this. Let's just go. And she says, well, the Snake Princess is refusing the order to assemble with the other warlords. So if you were able to convince her to obey the order, we could potentially use her ship to sneak in. And that's when he's like, oh, well, 100%. That's the perfect plan then. As they're in the midst of talking about this, here it is, I don't think this is a sister. Oh, no, it's not. Her name is Enishida. She comes running and finds them and tells them about how the Snake Princess is sick and nobody knows what's wrong with her. So then we go to the next episode, Love is a Hurricane, which is just so funny, you guys. I swear to God. So, oh my God, the sound always turns back on whenever I start another one. So the princess is really doing badly. She's in pain. She seems to be feverish. She's hardly speaking. She can't eat. She's like, just really, there's a sense of like, almost, is this the start of some sort of plague that I was wondering if maybe Luffy brought something with him, that it was going to be him introducing something into the bloodstream here that these women don't have defenses against. And I was like, this is about to get kind of real. I don't know if I want to see this. But then there's a mention that she keeps like grasping at her heart. And Granny says, I should have known. It's a pity that the virus came at a time like this. And all of the women who are attending Hancock are getting, understandably, pretty fucking impatient with Granny. Because she keeps talking like she knows what's going on, but she's not telling them what it is or what to do or any of that. So she also is like, well, it took the life of our last empress. The same fate befell the empress before her too. I suffered from the illness myself, but I left the country before it took my life. No remedy could save me. And she's saying all of this, but then just drops, hey, princess, Luffy's here, by the way. he's requested to see you. And it really does feel like a complete non sequitur. All the women in the room are just like, this is not the fucking time. What are you doing? But when she says it, and all the girls are just sort of like, well, I don't think that she's going to be able to manage it. All of a sudden, Hancock's on her feet and is immediately like, show him in quickly. And the camera, so to speak, isn't showing her eyes, but it is showing like from her cheeks down, and her cheeks are red. She's got that blushy thing going on. And that was when I started to suspect, like, wait a second, because of how quickly she recovered when Luffy was in, like, back in the equation. So Granny, of course, after seeing the way that she stands up, is like, yeah, I know what's up with this now. She says, Monkey D. Luffy, you are a man favored by fate. And I was like, is he? Because it doesn't seem like he's going to appreciate any of this. So Hancock goes out to talk to him, and he's first like, are you sure you're okay to talk? I heard you were ill. She says, it's okay. No illness can overtake me. To which I'm like, girl, you were literally on the ground, like writhing around. I get that you've got to put a good face on, but also there's the difference between like putting a face on and just straight up lying. But he explains about Ace and how he has to go rescue him. If we took a pirate ship, it'd be too slow. But I heard if we took a Navy ship, we would get there in time. And instead of going back to my friends, I need you to get on a Navy ship and take me with you. To which her sisters burst in on them and begin yelling at him about how selfish he is, about how he is basically asking her to return to a world where she was so badly mistreated, and that he's spitting in their faces by even asking this when he knows their history and their trauma. As like, we show you a little bit of mercy and you just immediately let it go to your head. You're lucky she doesn't turn you to stone and smash you. And then Hancock, without any rise in her voice, any real indication of like agreement with her sisters or disagreement, she just says, you want me to follow the government's orders and go with the other warlords. And Luffy's just like, yeah. And she says, if that's truly your request, then of course I'll go anywhere you like. And she's got a real blush going on. Her eyes are like luminous. She like I said last time about how much more dynamic her eyes looked when she smiled at him at the end of the previous episode. And it's even more so now. She's got almost downright like kawaii eye sparkles happening. And of course, everybody else is totally shocked. And Luffy sort of takes it for granted that he was able to convince her. He doesn't really seem to comprehend how big a deal it is that she completely reversed her position. And this is when Granny says, our Empress succumbed to the burning flames that are only known as love. There's a saying in the East Blue that describes these winds of passion. Love is always a hurricane. And I'm saying this now in level tones of simple explanation. I cannot explain adequately how over the top the delivery of these lines is from Granny. It's absolutely out of control. She is like screeching. There's an effect going on where it looks almost like she and the other sisters are looking into a burning oven and the heat of it's blowing their hair back. You know, there's just a whole It's so much. And I saw my friend Sydney yesterday. I haven't seen them in a while. Like, they were in like really going head first into their art. And so they didn't have time, and we were finally able to chat. And they started watching One Piece, which I didn't realize. And they've been watching it with their husband, and he will like have it on sometimes. Like Sid will be in another room doing dishes or working on art, and he will have it on. She isn't like with him for every episode, but when we were talking about it, they said, you know, I really enjoy One Piece when I'm there watching it with him. But when I'm in another room, the screaming, oh my God, I can't handle it. And they even said specifically like Chopper's voice, how piercing it is. And at first I got like so offended and defensive of Chopper, but I really had to take a step back and realize how true that is. And even like Owen, when, you know, he comes home in the middle of the day a lot and he'll take a nap. And there was a period there where he had not yet perfected the combination of sleep headphones over earplugs. And if I needed to watch One Piece, it was out of the question that he tried to take a nap. I sort of transitioned for a little while to trying to watch it on my computer with my earbuds so that he wouldn't have to hear it, because the screaming is so abrupt sometimes in this show. And like, I can't adjust the volume in time. I can't constantly be going up and down with it to compensate for how low the dialogue can be. So I was just laughing at this moment, because after having just had that conversation with Sydney, I was just thinking how obnoxious this moment would be if you weren't in the room seeing what was happening and understanding the context of it all. It would just be so annoying. And it goes on for such a long time. Meanwhile, Luffy is just cheering and excited that he got his way. And Hancock is looking at him with like sparkling eyes. And she says to herself, my heart is aflutter. I feel like I might do anything Luffy asks of me. I acquiesce without a second thought, and I don't regret it, not even in the slightest. And Granny explains it's love. And once it has a hold of your heart, it will squeeze and squeeze until you fall over dead if you cannot be with the one you desire. The empresses that came before you all fell in love with men as well. But as they were unable to leave their kingdom, they were forced to bottle up their feelings. While they stayed, their heartache grew and grew until the pain was so great that they died from sorrow. Little did you know that by agreeing to his request, you may have saved your own life. Now, look, I know I'm reading into this too much, but I do have to say how disappointed I am in a way that I'm sure would never have occurred to Oda as he's writing this. But, you know, we have this awesome community of only women who are badass fighters and work together. And then their leader is a stuck-up bitch who relies on her beauty for all of her power almost. And following that, we find out that every empress has died because she fell in love with a man and couldn't be with him, which is just so the opposite of empowering that it makes me want to cry. It's such a bummer. And again, I know that this is like, you know, me assigning more meaning to a thing, but it's just incredibly frustrating. Especially like, I just finished last night, I guested on an episode of Overdue, which is a really fun podcast about books. If you haven't listened to it, I recommend it. And I've guested on it a number of times. Pretty much every year around this time of year, they contact me and ask me to come on for something for Spooktober. And the book that we just covered was a book called Cackle, which is a really fun, light read that is all about a woman discovering that she doesn't need to have a romantic partner to be fulfilled and enjoy her life. And it's one of those where the main character can feel really aggravating sometimes, but also part of the aggravation is that I recognize myself in her. And so there's like a familiarity to how frustrating she is. And so I just got off of like this book that aims to empower and really emphasize that women are their own people and that men aren't necessary to complete them. And then come over to this where it's literally, if these women don't get their booze, they die, which sucks. So, you know, it's just, it is what it is. And she says, if Luffy hadn't asked you to do this, you would have lost your title of warlord and led this kingdom to ruin. And one may say, he is just as fortunate as you. After all, had fate not brought him to this island, the only way he could hope to enter that prison would be in chains, just like his brother. And I was like, that's actually a good point that had not occurred to me. It was like, probably this is the only way that this could have worked out for him. So Hancock calls the admiral, I can't remember this dude's name, and she's like, all right, I'm going to do what you ask and show up to this roundup. But there is one condition you've got to meet first. If you can't accept, you might as well turn your boat around and leave. And he says, let me hear it. And we cut away. And she then is saying her goodbyes to everybody. Luffy is on the head of one of the serpents that's like, I don't know if they count as sea kings. Is that what they are? That makes up their ship, like pulls it along. But all of the women are just really blown away that he was almost executed. And now he's like a favored guest, really, I guess. And he's talking about his friends. And he says something about how probably Sanji would love to meet you guys and that he likes girls so much it's scary. I bet he'd love to cook for you. Our musician's awesome too. He's a skeleton. His name's Brooke, but watch out, because as soon as he meets you, he's gonna want to check out your panties. Which I did kind of appreciate him giving them a heads up. To which I think, is it Buttercup? I can't remember her name. The bigger, more muscular of the trio that we originally met says, well, I have lots to show him, but I don't see the appeal. Which took me the fuck out. I laughed so hard. You guys, I think that part of what made that so funny to me was that you could take it in a couple ways. She's saying I have lots of panties to show him, like a large number of them, or that she's got such big panties that she has plenty to show, like in sheer size, like amount of a panty. And either way, it's really funny. And how mystified she is about why you would want to see them. Like, sure, he can, but who cares? And then Luffy mentions Chopper, and he says, but they're all guys except Nami and Robin. It's no fun if we can't all visit. And Margaret says, even if men are forbidden here, I think they'll make an exception because, you know, the princess clearly favors you at this point. So this is when she comes through. We have another unfortunate putting the kittens in her path. And I was just like, but why though? I wanted so much for Luffy to say something to her about maybe don't kick kittens, but he doesn't say anything. And I was very, very disappointed. So he says, we've got to hurry up, Snake Lady. Let's go. And I love all of the women who are fangirling over her are excited about the fact that, like, he calls her Snake Lady, which they find really disrespectful, but then Hancock says, you can call me Hancock if you like, and they think that's so cute. He calls her Hammock, and she has to correct him. You guys, it's so embarrassing. I don't know why, but him getting her name wrong bummed me out as much as if, like, my own crush got my name wrong. It was devastating. Then we have Granny, who says, the spark of a woman in love, it makes me long for the sweet days of my youth. And she's got this expression, and a girl behind her says, is something wrong, Granny Neon? Your face is looking rather grotesque. And I was like, can't an old woman enjoy, like, a moment without somebody making fun of how she looks? Like, leave this old woman alone. She's the only one of you that's got any goddamn sense. Let's be for real. And all of you need to just keep your goddamn mouth shut and let her have her moment. Christ's sake. So we have, like, the big opening in the wall that the ship goes through as everybody is, like, waving goodbye. And as they're waving goodbye, we see that they have the chopsticks in their nose as, like, a tribute to Luffy. I really love that it seems like he started an entire new trend. And eventually, Margaret is, like, left watching him, and her eyes get all teary. And I almost wondered if it was going to be that she was in love with him as well. She winds up just yelling, I hope you see your friends soon. But it felt like there was going to be more to it than that. So one of the ladies asks Granny, how is it that she's going to get Luffy in with her? Like, it's one thing for her to go, but how is that going to work? And Granny says, yeah, it is going to be pretty tricky. I know that they're after him. Like, he's got a huge bounty, and especially after what happened at Sabaody. But I've got a plan. I thought up a strategy, and our princess can be quite persuasive. And I was like, that's true. Like, what I found sort of compelling, actually, was what we cut to from here is Hancock on the ship with the Admiral. She's like, I think she's left her own ship and crossed over to his, if I'm not mistaken. And the attitude that she has is just extremely haughty. And I thought what she was going to do was sort of lean into her appearance and try to charm him into believing everything that she said. And I should have realized that because he isn't as susceptible to her charms, that maybe she wasn't going to take the same approach with him. But the only reason he wasn't susceptible was because he drove a sword through his hand. So I don't know if that technique may have actually worked anyway. But yeah, she's just sort of like, you know, take my word for things. And what it turns out is going on is that Luffy is hidden under her huge, like, robe that she's wearing, which it doesn't look like he should be able to fit under there, but I totally accept it. It's no problem. And he asks what changed her mind, and they get interrupted by the sound of her stomach growling. And he's sort of laughing. She's annoyed and embarrassed and says, like, I'm a beautiful, and I would never do something so crass. And I'm like, it's wild how many women actually are super embarrassed if their body makes any noises. Like, we're just not supposed to be human. That's really a thing. But he says, well, there's nobody else here. And I'm like, yeah, girl, it feels like you should just kind of roll with this. Because that's when you find out that Luffy is hidden inside of her clothing. And so that stomach growl is from him. And eventually, of course, he, like, sneezes because her hair tickles his nose. So she has to pretend to have a really masculine sneeze. And I do kind of enjoy how all of this is just undermining the femininity that she's, like, cultivated so much. At one point she's like, it's hard for me to walk. Can you like move up a little? And he does. And she like does a whoop and then gets all flushed. And I was like, what is he doing under there, ma'am? So this is when she turns the rest of the Marines that had been made into stone. She turns them back. And it really is, I think all she says is like awaken. It's really, really quick and easy. I was sort of like wondering if we would get to see, because when she turns the other women back, we don't see it. It cuts from him asking her to do it to them coming out of the gates of the arena. And I was like, is there a weird effect to it when she does it, when she awakens them, that means we can't see it? I don't know. But as all of this is happening, this admiral is getting more and more suspicious. And eventually she's just like, if you think that you can search me, like, go ahead and search me and you'll see that there's no issue. I don't have a problem with it. And Luffy is doing, what are you doing? He's going to find me. But she's calling his bluff. And really, I think what it is that he knows the kind of power she could have over him if he gets too close. And so he's just like, no, I'm good. I'm sure it's fine. But yeah, when she says awaken, she sort of like blows on her hand like she's blowing a kiss, and it passes over them like this little heart breeze. And all of them wake up and don't remember anything. So yeah, she's on his ship and they leave her ship behind. We'll make a stop at Impel Down before we go to Marineford. Marineford? I'm not sure exactly how they say it. I don't remember. So Marine Admiral is getting news from Vice Admiral Mamonga, I think is how you say it. Snake Princess Boa Hancock came to speak and agreed to our conditions. I'm told they're on their way now. And he says, well, I just hope they're not late. That woman is quite formidable. Now we'll have 6 of the 7 warlords with us. Hawkeye Mihawk, Bartholomew Kuma, Don Quixote do Flamingo, Gecko Moria, Marshall D. Teach, and Boa Hancock. And the 7th did a little time in prison, cool his head. Perhaps he's ready to aid in our fight now. No, sir, just as before, he's adamantly refusing to fight. He went so far as to say he would relinquish his title as warlord. And the Marine Admiral says, I really expected he would be the most cooperative. I'm really surprised he's getting hung up on principle. We need you, Jimbei. And we get this, like, silhouette of it looks like a really fat guy. And I thought this was going to be somebody we'd met before, but that person does not look familiar to me at all. And I may be just forgetting, but anyway. So somebody comes in and says, we have a small issue with the 500 pirates that Admiral Kizaru captured at Sabaody. That is to say, the staff at Impel Down said they can't hold them. So this dude says we'll just send them to a labor camp. If it doesn't have to do with Whitebeard, I frankly just don't have time for it right now. I understand, sir, but St. Roswald is... and he interrupts. I'm reading this whole conversation because there's a lot going on here that I don't have context for, so I wasn't able to remember it as easily due to the lack of context makes names and circumstances harder for me to remember. So, yeah, let's try. I understand, sir, but St. Roswald is, and he cuts in and says, just let the admirals handle it for once. And where the hell is Garp? I thought he informed you, sir, but he left for Impel Down quite some time ago. And this admiral is just like, I fucking should have known he was going to do that. We're about to be in battle, so I didn't think he would do it now, but I should have known. And then, let's see. Right, there's another guy who shows up here. Excuse me, sir, I'm afraid we have a situation. Whitebeard's ship is advancing. I see. I assume the guard ships are on the line. Put me through. I'd rather speak to them directly. And he says, I can't do that. We've lost contact with all 23 Navy vessels on Whitebeard's main ship. Given the and with Whitebeard's main ship, we can only conclude they were eliminated by the enemy. And he's like, the whole fleet of 23? There's no way. And this dude says there's been some weird stuff going on with the other pirate ships as well. And let's see, there's been some worrying activity from other pirate ships in the New World as well. Without guard ships, we won't have any idea how many ships the enemy is sending or when he's sending them. I've arranged for replacements, but we're in the dark right now. And this guy is very upset. He says, we've been had. And I don't know, like, I guess he is thinking, we thought we were laying the trap, but actually Whitebeard had laid the trap, I guess. Until new ships are in place, we're flying blind. As long as Ace is there, they may even have the audacity to strike Impel down, so be ready for anything. And then we cut to Garp going and visiting Ace, and Ace just looks like he is not in great shape. He is just really, I don't know if he's being starved or beaten or both, but he is looking very fucked up here, chained to a wall. And Garp sees him and says basically, yeah, hate to see it. And it ends with him going, you still breathing in there, Ace? And that's the end of the episode. So I'm over time. I've got to wrap. But thank you guys so much for listening. Hope that the event isn't too impossible for folks to find, because I didn't see anybody in here today, and I think this is the first time I haven't had a soul chime in, so I'm just a little bit worried, but hopefully we're all right. Thank you guys again. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.